Hi, everybody. This is our Sankiam, or seventh grade lesson on natural disasters in developing nations. Because we've already talked about natural disasters in developed nations. In fact, we'll review that a little bit on what we discussed, some of the important factors there. This is a supplement to the document that is on our class workspace on our EcoDirect drive. It has the title of 04, and then it's something that looks like natural disasters in developing nations. This will always also be sent to you via the Travail à faire aspect of EcoDirect. So let's get started. Now, even though we're talking about natural disasters in developing nations, one of the things that we need to go over is essentially how developed nations respond to risks of natural disasters. We're going to do this by talking about things that we already talked about in class, as well as reviewing the episode of The Simpsons, Hurricane Nettie, that we watched in class. And if you haven't seen the episode, it's funny, it's heartwarming. You don't need it to understand this, but it would help a little bit, okay? So one of the things that developed nations have in order to prepare them or to be able to respond to risks of natural disasters are early warning and detection systems, meaning that depending on what natural disaster you're going to have, we have enough information before to know that there's going to be a natural disaster so that we can prepare ourselves. Now, in this slide, we have a couple of different things. Here on the left, this is actually from a few years ago. This is a National Weather Service. Actually, I don't think it's them, but it's somebody. It is National Weather Service. Data projection of something called Tropical Storm Nate. Remember, we name all of our storms. This is from 2017. So this is where on 4 a.m. on a Friday, it's right here, and they can project where and when it will be at certain places. In fact, they can predict the intensity of this up to the point where, for example, we have SSS, I assume that means tropical storm, and then once it gathers energy over the warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico, it would have hurricane strength before it strikes the southern coast of the United States. But again, we're talking about 4 a.m. on Friday, so people can wake up on Friday and know, oh crap, it's going to get here Sunday night. So we've got a day to get ready, whatever that get ready means. It could be some of the things that we talk about later. In The Simpsons, there's the scene in the beginning where Lisa successfully determines that a hurricane is coming. I don't know how she's able to do that. It could have just been a thunderstorm. But what they're able to do is they're able to understand that there's this hurricane coming and they need to prepare for it, thanks to the television broadcast of Kent Brockman from the Channel 6 news team. Weather Service has warned us to brace ourselves for Hurricane Barbara. Yeah, we name storms after people. I don't know if other places do that. So that's the first step, is early detection and warning systems. Now, one of the ways that a group of people can brace or prepare themselves from this is actually to evacuate, to get out of the area, depending on if there's enough time, depending on if there's infrastructure there. And we talked about this image right here. This is the evacuation order from Hurricane Rita in Houston. Now, obviously, as we talked about in class, this is a little bit full, this evacuation, but the infrastructure of having highways to get people out, to have an evacuation plan, to order people to get out, exists in these places. And as we read about, eventually they would open up lanes of inbound traffic to Houston so that more people could get out. And of course, in the Simpsons episode, we saw how the vague army people suggested or advised Grandpa Simpson and the rest of the residents of the Springfield retirement home to evacuate in the event that it was going to be too serious for them. Of course, Grandpa says, I was born in this nursing home and I'll die in this nursing home. And then he says, okay, I'll go. So that's the second thing, is the evacuation infrastructure. The third is the supply capabilities. So for example, if a group of people have to stay, they're able to prepare for during and after the natural disaster. And we talked a lot about hurricanes. You're going to see an image that probably makes you think about what's going on right now with the coronavirus and quarantine and confinement here in France. Okay, you see here people stocking up on supplies. This is actually not from the coronavirus panic buying, but this is from Hurricane Dorian in Florida a few years ago. Okay, see the types of things that people are buying, and they kind of make sense. We have this woman here in the foreground. Okay, she's got her toilet paper. She doesn't have 78 cases of it. Just need one. But she's got things that we might consider non-perishable food. For example, ramen noodles that you can cook with simply boiling water. Looks like she's got some applesauce. She's got some Gatorade down here. She has some charcoal that she can use to light a fire. I don't know. I hope she's not doing grilling inside of her home. Maybe that's more for after, just to make sure that they've got some. You see other people, they have things like, there's quite a bit of toilet paper or paper towels. Looks like there's some mixed nuts right there, ready-made food. This person looks like they have a bunch of bottles of wine, so they're getting ready for it in an appropriate way. Now, the Springfieldianites, when Hurricane Barbara was coming, this is a little bit of all of the scene. Remember Apu on top of the Quickie Mart. When there's the crowd gathering, remain calm, you'll all have a chance to be gouged. We talked about price gouging, and again, to link this with things that we've already, that we've seen in real life, if you remember, or if you've seen maybe that some places, especially on the internet, were trying to charge more money than was normal for hand sanitizer. And that's an example of price gouging that we've seen in this modern situation that we're in. Okay, you see all of the people rushing in to get to the store, and we have what happens 3 seconds after in Port Kirk Van Houten. Remember, they had the Cow Chow that magically became Hurricane Chow, and people are panic buying. Okay, and all that's left on the shelves, hopefully you guys haven't had to see too much of this the present day, but if you go to the pasta aisle in the supermarkets today, not a lot there. Sometimes the only things that are left are creamed eels, corn nog, and wadded beef. I would not suggest eating any of these foods if they exist in real life. And if somebody offers you Hurricane Chow, you can politely decline that. Okay. And after, we have our supply capabilities. So after the natural disaster strikes, if there's no power, if there's not a lot of water, if there's no heat, gas, whatever, we have our supplies. But then also, if there's destruction, we need to be able to rebuild. And these are all things that developed nations are a little bit, I guess you might say, more ready for. Okay. Here in the left image, we actually have a home that's being rebuilt in New Orleans after the destruction of Katrina. It goes too slow because we have to rely on just people being nice, but it works out better, we hope, than when the Springfield residents rebuild Ned Flanders' home, and all of the interesting things that happen with that. So those are things that happen in developed nations, but let's ask ourselves the question, is this the same kind of response that would be normal in a developing nation? Okay. Would they have the early detection and warning systems? Would they have the infrastructure and the ability to be able to evacuate from this place if they even have the warning? Would they have the supply capabilities to be able to survive during and after the natural disaster? Would they be able to rebuild, have these reconstruction efforts? And the answer is not really. Okay. The early detection and warning systems, yes, that would be possible, because hopefully the developed world would be able to note this and pass along information, even if maybe a developing country like Atomistan would not have its own weather satellites or seismic sensors or something like that. So we hope that other more developed countries would help the developing nations. But when it comes to evacuation infrastructure, that doesn't always really exist. If we can go back just a little bit, the way that people are able to evacuate in Houston, again, even if it wasn't done really, really, really well, was that there were the highways for people to at least try to evacuate. That might not exist in a developing country. Also, you saw with that most of the evacuation took place in cars, and if you're dealing with a society that doesn't have a lot of cars, well, then that's also going to be a problem. Supply capabilities, sometimes we're talking about countries that don't have proper supply capabilities, even when there's not natural disaster, when they're eating creamed eels, corn knock, wadded beef, and hurricane chow during good times. Okay. And then reconstruction efforts, unfortunately, a lot of the times, developing countries have to rely on developed countries to help them reconstruct what's been destroyed in a natural disaster. They have to rely on the countries, they have to rely on non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross or the Red Crescent. So you can see that developed countries have advantages in ways that they're able to deal with the risks of natural disasters that developing nations don't have. And in your document, there's a couple of specific examples of this. One is the 2010 Haiti earthquake, which we can see here it struck right here in this part of the country of Haiti, near Port-au-Prince, the capital. Okay, and when we think about the figures, for example, of Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita, Hurricane Katrina was a horrible tragedy, did happen in a developed country, so the death toll, as badly as that disaster was managed by a developed country, you still had deaths in only anywhere between 1 and 2,000, which is still a horrible tragedy, but not on the same level that you find in, for example, the Haiti earthquake. We're dealing with more than 300,000 people that died specifically because of this earthquake, because of buildings falling down and people being crushed to death, or people being, not necessarily crushed to death, but being trapped underneath the buildings, and they're still alive, but people can't find them in time, and so they end up dying of starvation or of lack of food. And even if they are able to be saved, we have approximately another 300,000 people that were injured in this. So you have to be able to have the medical care for them to get better afterwards. You had 1.5 million people displaced This means that their homes were destroyed and they had to essentially evacuate after the fact into places that, we're talking about things that are very similar to refugee camps with tent cities and slums, and really not that the conditions were great in Haiti before, but a lot more desperate than before. Even a few years after, you had people in the millions in need of aid and assistance from non-governmental organizations. For example, the United Nations, the United States, as I mentioned before, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent, and then 3.3 million facing food shortages because they still didn't have that infrastructure, and because it's an earthquake, there's no real way to prepare for that type of natural disaster. But then you're talking about a place that maybe already didn't have lots and lots of food. This isn't like Fallout, where, sorry if you don't play Fallout, by the way. This isn't like Fallout where you can just kind of, go looting in a fully stocked grocery store after a natural disaster, because there's still going to be, crispy squirrel bits or whatever else is in the Fallout universe. You had already, places that didn't have an abundance of food. So, even getting the food that existed to places would have been much more complicated. If you're interested, I highly suggest that you maybe do a little bit of extra research. This is the same journalist that we talked about in class who was interviewing the senator from Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. She was the one who wasn't answering the question, and he got really upset with her. He has done some very good journalism right after the hurricane struck in 2010. This guy, Anderson Cooper, from the news organization CNN, went to Haiti and did lots of reports. And he said, if you're bored, if you want to do a little bit more research about this on YouTube, you can just search Anderson Cooper 2010 Haiti earthquake for some more information. Okay. And our final example that we're going to talk about is a little bit more in the past, but I remember when this happened, I was in university and thinking about how awful it was. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Now, in your document, you have a little bit of an infographic that explains exactly how a tsunami forms, but essentially it's an earthquake that happens on the seafloor, and because of the movement of things, it moves the water, so you end up having large waves, and eventually these crests in some places. Crest means the wave breaks, so it's instead of just going like, it goes like this, and then it starts to do the thing where it falls down. And so that happened. The earthquake was here, kind of just off the coast of Indonesia, and you can see the ripple effects that it had in the places where it struck. Now, it is along, if you remember from the very, very, very first document we looked at with different faults and tectonic plates, okay? You can see that the earthquake happened in the fault line between the Eurasian plate and the Indo-Australian plate. So this is kind of, in a way, close to the Ring of Fire that we discussed. But in any case, remember, earthquakes, it's those two plates, they're either coming up against each other, or they're spreading apart from each other, or they're moving like this, and they catch, so it builds up pressure, and they're still trying to move, and then all of a sudden, boom! And that boom is the earthquake that causes destruction when it happens on land, but also it can cause destruction when it happens underwater, because like I said, you have the ripple effect of the water, and it creates giant waves. They bag And you can see here, this photo was taken as the waves hit. I believe this was Sri Lanka, but I'm not sure. Okay. But again, if you take a look at the countries that were affected by this, when you ask yourself, are these developed or developing countries? We have India, Bangladesh, they say Burma here, it's called Myanmar today, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Maldives that we've talked about with climate change, Somalia, Kenya, and Tanzania. These are all developing countries. So, sometimes for tsunamis, you can have advanced warning. Sometimes organizations will say, oh, hey, there was an earthquake underneath or on the ocean floor. So this region to this region, you're on tsunami watch. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes there's a tsunami like this. As far as how many people died, you're still talking about, at least more than 200,000. They're not really sure exactly how much or how many died because of the actual being killed by the force of the tsunami. But what it caused was a lack of food, water, and medical treatment for the people that were injured. So you certainly had just as many, if not more, people that would have been injured and possibly died from this. And it's again because they don't have the infrastructure. These countries don't always have the infrastructure to be able to deal with these disasters right when they happen. They have to wait sometimes for developed nations or, again, non-governmental organizations to come in and help with relief efforts. Sometimes that time between the disaster and when the relief can get there can be quite long. Sometimes the relief can be very complicated to distribute, and you wind up with people that don't make it in this situation. Okay, so those are the two main examples of natural disasters, at least the ones that we're going to talk about natural disasters that hit or struck developing nations. Here's what I need you guys to do for homework. Yes, you have homework. No, I don't have pity for you. Don't ask. Here's your homework. On the documents, again, the document that I will send to you, it will be on the class workspace as well. Okay. There's the first article that natural disasters cause way more deaths in poor countries than in rich ones. There are a series of, I believe, 4 questions. You need to answer those in complete sentences. So if the question is, hey, what is the thing like this? The response is, hey, the thing like this is like this. That was a terrible example. But you know how to answer your questions in complete sentences. Okay. Here's how I need you to do this homework. Okay. You can type out your responses. You don't have to write them down. Okay. I don't know why it's not letting me highlight this, but whatever. Okay. You can type them out. But you need to send them to me in a PDF file. Do not send me a Word document. Do not send me any other type of JPEG. Okay. PDF. Now, don't complain to me that you don't know how to make a PDF. You're all younger and smarter than me with technology, and I can figure it out, okay? Probably what you'll need to do I know it has this in Pages, because I have a Mac. You have a place where you can export something to PDF. Or if it's Microsoft Word, maybe it says convertir in French, okay? But it's your responsibility to do that. You need to label it as, the name of the document needs to be your last name, like mine would be Pilot, okay? And then natural disasters. I need this because I need to be able to organize. I'm going to be getting homework from 5e, 4e, and probably 3e, and maybe even the collège this week. So when I save a document to my computer, I need to be able to sort it. So it needs to say your last name and natural disasters. Nothing else. Nothing else. You need to send them to me by email, the EcoDirect email, by noon, 12 o'clock on Friday, March 27th. If you send them to me at 12:01, or if I receive them at 12:01, you don't get credit for the assignment, and I will be very unhappy. Okay? If you have any questions about any of the things that I talked about in this video, about any of the things in the document, or if you watched some of those Anderson Cooper videos that I suggested, then you can send me a message on École Direct, and I will be happy to answer them. I believe that's all I have for you today. Make sure that you take care of yourself and each other during this time. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.